What is going on, guys? Duranathor here, and today I thought I would bring you another Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile, but this time we're looking at the Fortune Ladies. I'll go over what I'm playing, and then talk about a couple combos towards the end. The side deck is just sort of other cards that you can play. I will briefly touch on them at the end. But jumping into the main deck, we play 3 Fortune Lady Past. When Fortune Lady Past is on your board during the standby phase, you increase its level by 1. All of your Fortune Lady cards have that effect during the standby phase. All of them level up. And they also all have their attack equal to their level times a number. Past and Light are 200. Water is 300. Dark is 400, and Every is 400. But we play 3 Fortune Lady Past, because you can banish spellcasters from your hand, field, or graveyard to increase or decrease the level of a Fortune Lady monster you control. It is just spellcasters, you don't have to banish Fortune Lady monsters. We also play 3 Fortune Lady Light, because when it is removed from the field by a card effect, you can special summon another Fortune Lady monster from your deck. Most of the time you will be using Past's effect to banish a Light that is on the field, to special summon a Fortune Lady Water. When Water is summoned, you draw 2. It's not a once per turn, so if you can summon multiple Fortune Lady Waters, you can draw 4, 6, 8 cards. We play the 1 Fortune Lady Dark, mainly because it feels like you kind of have to, because it gives you that little bit of recursion. When a Fortune Lady monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, and sends it to the graveyard, you can target a Fortune Lady monster in your graveyard and special summon it. It's not just Dark, it can be any of your Fortune Lady monsters. So you can use Every the Synchro to destroy 1 while Dark is on the board. Dark will activate to allow you to special summon something. You can use Dark to destroy another. Dark will activate again to let you special summon, because it isn't once per turn. Most of the time though, you don't really want to go into Dark. You kind of have to play it. At very worst case, if you've, say, banished your 2 Waters, or you have both Waters in your hand, you can use Past to banish Light to summon Dark to go into Every. 3 Fortune Vision. Fortune Vision lets you add a Fortune Lady card from your deck. Not just monster, any Fortune Lady card. And then, during your turn, if a monster is banished from your side of the field, for the rest of the turn, monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects, and if a card your opponent controls is banished by a card effect, you can make battle damage. The next battle damage you take this turn become 0. That one doesn't really come up, but the first effect where you use Past to banish Light will activate Vision so that monsters on your side of the field can't be destroyed by card effect. You're probably questioning how you get Past and Light on the board. You do Fortune Lady Calling. So if you control a Fortune Lady monster, you special summon one from your deck with a different name. And for the rest of the turn, you can only Synchro Summon. So you just got to remember that if you are going to try and do anything else. In this build that I'm playing, as you can see, it's all Synchro monsters, and then the last bit is the Magister stuff. This deck can't get into the Magister's Xyz fusion. It can only get into Artemis by using one of the Fortune Ladies, so being locked into Synchros doesn't really affect it too much. And we play 2 Fortune's Future. It's one of those cards where I don't think you want to play 3, because you don't always want to see it, but you don't want to play 1, because it's very, very handy to be able to target a banished Fortune Lady monster, return it to the grave, and then draw 2. Most of the time, you will draw this card, or want to draw this card from Water, so that you've already done the banishing effect. And then the final Fortune Lady card we play is 2 Fortune Lady Rewind. This is a one-of, but I'm playing Desires, and if you're playing a one-of, you're going to banish it. But Fortune Lady Rewind lets you target banished Fortune Lady monsters with different names and special summon them. You do shuffle them into the deck during the end phase, so you do want to do this on your draw phase, because majority of the time the banished cards are going to be Light, Water, and maybe 1 or 2 Past. So you'll summon the light, the water, the past. Water will let you draw 2, and it's in the draw phase, so your opponent can't draw you. We play 3 Apprentice Illusion Magician, and then the 1-of Dark Magician. I know I have just said that if you're playing a 1-of, you're probably going to banish it from Desires, but there is no reason to play more than 1 Dark Magician. There isn't even really a reason to play the 1 Dark Magician. It's just that if you are discarding a card to special summon Apprentice Illusion Magician, being able to then add the Dark Magician replaces the card in your hand that you've discarded, and it's a spellcaster that we can banish with Past. It's also a Dark that we can banish with Allure. The reason that Apprentice Illusion Magician is in here is because at very, very worst case, you can use the level 6 Illusion Magician and your level 1 Past to go into every. The Dark Magician is there, as I said, you will never summon this, because you don't want to tribute 2 to normal summon a 2500 vanilla, and there's no other way for the deck to summon it, apart from reasoning. We play 3D Shifter, because Dimension Shifter can just win you a game. Even if it's, your opponent still can play when you use Dimension Shifter on them, but most of the time they will end up with a very, very weakened board. Dimension Shifter doesn't really affect this deck. If anything, it helps it, because it makes Fortune's Future and Fortune Lady Rewind guaranteed to be live. And you can also move Shifter from your graveyard using the effect of Past. So you could, for instance, Dimension Shifter, summon Fortune Lady Past, Fortune Lady Calling to summon Fortune Lady Light, Past effect to banish Light and the Dimension Shifter from your graveyard, Light activates to special summon Water, so you draw 2, you use Water and Past to go into Fortune Lady Every, the level 7 Synchro, so now you have Past, Light and Water in your banished zone for Fortune Lady Rewind, and you've moved Shifter into the banished zone as well, so you have 0 cards in graveyard, so that if you haven't already won by then, you can Dimension Shifter your opponent again. We played 2 Allure of Darkness. Once again, it's one of those where, because you only have 10 Dark spellcasters, and the majority of the time you do want to be banishing Past, you don't really ever want to banish Dark, because there's not a way of getting Dark back from your graveyard, whereas if you've banished Past, move Past back to the graveyard with Fortune's Future, you can at least use Dark's effect when you destroy a monster to summon the Past. You don't have a way of getting Dark back unless you're playing Monster Reborn. It is an option in this deck, because Reborn can get back Water for you to draw 2, but it's one of those cards, Monster Reborn that is, where you already need to have done a couple things to be able to play Monster Reborn, and this deck already has way too many cards that are like that. Fortune's Future, Fortune's Lady Rewind, those are cards that you already need to have done something for them to be able to use their effects properly, and then Past, Calling, even Visions, you need something else on the board or in your hand to be able to use their effects. Playing something like Monster Reborn means that you have to have done something, and this deck doesn't always do something. But the 2 Allure is there, because if you've already D-shifted and you don't want to D-shift your opponent again, you can banish a D-shifter with the Allure. You can also banish the Dark Magician with the Allure, so it's just like a way of guaranteeing that you know you're drawing your 2, and you're getting rid of a card that you're not really going to use, or you're getting rid of a Fortune Lady and putting it back to your graveyard with Fortune's Future. And we play 1 Upstart because it's just to draw 1. You're not that bothered about your opponent gaining 1,000 life points. It's just a nice draw 1, and it's there rather than like a 3rd copy of Allure. I know it's gone down to 2, but rather than like a 3rd copy of Desires or something like that. If this card wasn't at 1, you'd probably just play 3 of it, just because it makes it with it being at 1, it makes this deck a 39 card deck. If you could play 3 of it and make this deck a 37 card deck, you 100% will, because it's one of those where you just need to get through the deck as much as possible to hit multiple combo pieces. That is why we're playing the 2 Pot of Desires. As you can see, there are quite a few 1-ofs. The ones that we can, so like Rewind, we're playing 2 of so it doesn't get hit. I would play 2 Dark, but it's just, you just don't want to. You don't want to see Dark. You're using it as like a utility. Like, you only ever want to summon Dark if you've done everything else, and you're using Fortune Lady Calling to summon the Dark. Because cards that are banished face down, you can't get back with rewind, and you can't put back with future. I would rather play something different, but if you play extra Aval Prosperity in this, you have to be really, really strange with your extra deck, and you then also can't draw for the rest of your turn, which then completely makes water, future, allure, it just makes them completely redundant. This deck has enough of its own draw power, but you need to have done something to get that draw power, which is the biggest problem. So Desire's just, you either use it right at the end of your turn, or at very worst case you can use it like at the beginning, because this deck does so much. If your opponent does have Ash, they're probably going to Ash something to begin with, more than likely the Fortune Vision, so then you know that you can play your Desires to draw 2. But we do have the one call by, like you have to play call by. When call by was at 3, you played 3 in this. This deck just loses to draw and suffers very, very badly against Ash Blossom. There is the argument for playing Crossout Designator and then your own Ash Blossoms and your own draws. But the problem is, this deck needs like 3 or 4 things to be able to do something. If one of the cards, in your hand is Ash, one of the cards is Droll, those 2 could potentially be a different card. It could be your Apprentice Illusion Magician, could be your Fortune Lady Calling, it could be your Fortune Lady Past. Like, it's a difficult one because you want to play the hand traps because they are strong cards. But if you play them, they could just be something else that makes the deck work. It doesn't feel like the deck works with the hand traps. I also play a 1-of Reasoning, and I also play 1 for 1. You ideally want to be doing 1 for 1, but Reasoning can help out. If you have absolutely nothing, Reasoning can just get a monster on the board for you. You hope it's a Fortune Lady, because you can then Fortune Lady Calling. But Reasoning does also potentially get out the Dimension Shifter or the Apprentice Illusion Magician. So if you have just Past and Reasoning, and the 3 other cards are, say, like 3 rivalries, you can Reasoning. If your opponent doesn't call 6, you can hit an Illusion Magician or a Dimension Shifter. You can then summon the Past to make every the level 7. Ideally, though, you want to be hitting 1 for 1, because 1 for 1 lets you summon Past to Synchro even more. If you've done your combo to get to Fortune Lady Every, you can then 1 for 1 to summon another Past. You can use Past and Every to make Crystal Wing, and then during your opponent's end phase, you can get your Every back if you haven't got Rivalry on the board. But we do play 3 Rivalry, simply because it's another one of those cards like D-Shifter where you can just win the game by activating it, and it is possible for this deck just to stick to Spellcasters. I'll go over it more in depth. That is why we're playing Hyper Librarian, Virgil, and the Zorua. So you aren't too worried about getting locked into Spellcasters because all of your main deck monsters are Spellcasters, but your opponent can sometimes just lose if you lock them into one type. And then finally we are playing 3 Solemn Judgment, because it's just an Omni Negate where you sacrifice your life points. Once again, this deck is kind of like a little bit of a, something else needs to happen. So by playing the Judgments, it's a card on its own that can kind of stop your opponent. And you're drawing that much that if you can draw 1 or 2 Judgments, sometimes Judgment your opponent twice, you can just win the game from it because it stops them from doing everything. Judgment is a pretty strong card. There are obviously other cards and things you can play. I'll go over a couple of the ones in the side deck just after we've gone through the extra deck. But moving on to there, we play the Formula Synchron because it's a level 2, it's a tuner, and it lets you draw a card. So if you have Past and Light on the board, you can Past and Light to go into Formula Synchron to draw 1. You can use Apprentice Illusion Magician, discard 1 to special summon it. You can then use Formula Synchron and Apprentice Illusion to go into Crystal Wing. Cupid Pitch is mainly there just so you can win in time if it does reach time. When it's Synchro summoned, sent to the graveyard, for a Synchro summon, you inflict damage to your opponent equal to the new Synchro summon monster's level times 100. You will never do the add because nothing in the Fortune Lady main deck has 600 defense, and it's also a level 4 and Apprentice Illusion Magician level 6 to go into Chaos Angel. Chaos Angel is just a very, very good card, and you're then using a light and a dark, which basically gives it like complete protection. It's not very often you'll go into Cupid Pitch, but it's there as a level 4 for you to go into. As previously mentioned, TG Hyper Librarian and Virgil, the Rockstar, the Burning Abyss, are simply there because they're level 5 and level 6 spellcasters if you've got Rivalry. That is a good point. If you're playing things like that, there is also the option of Secret Village. There are the odd occasions where you will synchro summon a couple times and Hyper Librarian gets you an extra draw or two. It's mainly there because it's a spellcaster. It's also a dark, so you can boost it with Apprentice Illusion to make it a 4/4 if you need to get over something big. Virgil's a light, which makes it a little bit more difficult, but you can, when you go to summon Chaos Angel, you can treat a light or dark monster as a tuner. So if you have say you are playing Monster Reborn, you pass to get rid of light to summon water. Water draws 2, you draw the Monster Reborn, you water and pass to make Virgil, you Monster Reborn the water, draw another 2 if you have another Fortune Lady. If you don't, then you just reborn the water and use water and Virgil to go into Chaos Angel, which then gives it the synchro monsters you control are unaffected by monsters effect activated by your opponent. Mainly there for a spellcaster, can also kind of get you up into Chaos Angel. Coral Dragon is quite handy because it's a tuner on its own. The same thing if you have a way of getting your Fortune Lady water, or if you've done your Fortune Lady rewind and you've got, say, pass, light and water on the board. Pass to get rid of light, summon a water, draw 2, make a Coral Dragon and water that you summoned from Fortune Lady rewind to go into Chaos Angel. When Coral Dragon is sent to the graveyard, you can draw one. It is just when it's sent to the graveyard, so you get the draw from you doing a synchro summon, and you also get the draw if your opponent destroys it. Most of the time, you'll be using it and Fortune Lady Light to go into Fortune Lady Every, which is the Fortune Lady boss monster. It gains 400 attack per level when it's a level 7, so at default it's 2,800, and then when it levels up during your standby phase, you can banish a face-up monster your opponent controls. So it becomes a 3/2, and you banish your opponent's monster. Because it has a recursion effect, during your opponent's end phase, if Every is in your graveyard, you can banish one other spellcaster monster to special summon it. May seem kind of counterproductive to have Every with that effect and Dimension Shifter, but because we've got Fortune's Future, you can put the Every back into your graveyard and draw 2, and then as long as you haven't banished your Dimension Shifter, Every will activate. You can banish the Shifter to summon Every, for then your draw phase you can Shifter again. If you're gonna do that, you want to send Every there on your turn, because you can only get her back into the graveyard by using Fortune's Future. So if your opponent destroys Every on their turn and she's in the banished zone, and then you put Fortune's Future to put Every back into your graveyard on your turn, you don't get her back until the end of your opponent's turn. If you haven't Dimension Shifted, then that's all well and good, because more than likely you're going to have a different spellcaster in your graveyard because you would have used Past and Water to special summon Every. Every's biggest problem is that she's level 7. If she was level 6, you could Past, get rid of light, summon Water, go straight into Every. Because she's level 7, you need that extra spellcaster to banish, which makes the deck just a little bit more awkward. It's you know, it would have been really nice for them to have made Every a level 6, but she is a level 7, so the deck just needs that little bit extra. The other level 7 that we play for going first is Dawn Dragster. It's a spell and trap negate, and it levels itself down when you negate the traps, so it puts itself back to a level 5 for 1 negate, and then on your turn, if you have another negate, you can put it down to level 3. You can then normal summon a Past, use the level 3 Dawn Dragster and Past to go into Cupid Pitch, Apprentice Illusion Magician, discard 1, summon it, go into Chaos Angel. And then Black Rose Dragon. If you guys have played Fortune Lady, or if you know how Fortune Lady works, then you potentially know how absolutely broken this card is in Fortune Lady. Pairing this with Fortune Vision which stops your monsters being destroyed by card effect even if Fortune Vision leaves the field. You can nuke the entire board, but keep your monsters. Going second, you will want to Vision to add a Fortune Lady card. If you've already got Past, you'll add Calling. If you've only got Calling, you'll add Past. Normal summon the Past, Calling to play the Light, Past to banish Light. If you've got another spellcaster, you banish another spellcaster as well, so then you can Water to draw 2. If you don't, you just want to go for Dark, because you can use the level 2 Past, the level 5 Dark to go into Black Rose Dragon and nuke the board. But your Black Rose Dragon stays. If you're doing it, say, like turn 3 or 4, all your other monsters stay as well. It really catches your opponent off guard when you do manage to do this. And it works. Works really well, because it gets rid of all your opponent's spell and traps, and it just gives you free reign. Yeah, okay, like, you end up with just a Black Rose Dragon, but your opponent has nothing. It is pretty good. I've already slightly touched on it, but Crystal Wing's there. It's an Omni Negate, and is also good at getting over level 5 or higher bigger monsters, especially ones that try and then like activate an effect to protect themselves when you attack, because you then just negate it with Crystal Wing. You can get into it using either Formula Synchron and Apprentice Illusion, Cupid Pitch and Water, Coral Dragon, and a level 2 Past or Light, or every and a Past to make the level 8. Already touched on Chaos Angel. Pretty good card. Pretty easy to make. We have Zorua as the level 8 spellcaster. If Zorua is synchro summoned, you can equip a Magistus monster from your extra deck, and then your opponent can activate the effects of monsters with the same type, which is why we're playing Maiden Artemis as the Link, Goddess Ninaruru as the Xyz, Dragon Vaphram as a Synchro, and Saint Iwis as the Fusion. It just completely blocks one type of extra deck monsters. So that is it for the main deck. That is it for the extra deck. Briefly, select the cards in the side. I'll start with the Fortune Lady ones. You side Fortune Lady Fire with 3 Nibiru, because Fortune Lady Fire pops a monster and deals damage equal to its attack. If you have a massive Nibiru token and you normal summon Past, Fortune Lady Calling, special summon Fire, blow up the 11k token, you win. You side 3 Past and you side 3 Nibiru. Not Past, sorry, 3 Fire and 3 Nibiru. Wind is one of those niche cards, because you can destroy spell or traps your opponent controls equal to the number of Fortune Lady monsters you control, but only when it's normal summoned. If it was when it was special summoned, you'd probably play 2, maybe even 3, probably 2. I think you'd want it, because if you were playing 1 of it and then you drew it, you'd probably be a bit sad, because it is handy just to have stuff in there. Obviously the argument now is like you can just play a one-off Harpy's Feather Duster, but it is unfortunate that Wind is normal summoned. If it was normal or special summoned, it would be absolutely broken. Fortune Lady Earth, I don't see why you'd ever want to play Fortune Lady Earth. It is a way to win in time, but you have to have Past and Earth on the board. You can Past Fortune Lady Calling, summon Earth, Past effect to level up Earth, banish the Past, Earth levels up, you deal 400, you win. It is also a case of you can Past, Calling, summon Earth, and then just instantly go into every. But I just don't see a reason why you would ever want to play Earth. I don't know why you'd ever want to just go straight into every when you can, you know, banish Light to special summon Dark, which thins out the deck a bit, or you can banish Light and 1 more to play Water to draw 2. I don't know why you'd ever want to just go for Earth. If Earth didn't exist, I'm 100% sure that every would be a level 6. So, unfortunately, Earth does exist. It's just not good. You never want to play it. We have Time Passage, where you can target a Fortune 80 monster you control and increase its level by 3. There's just better cards that you can play. You have Inherited Fortune, which during the turn a face-up Fortune 80 monster you control is destroyed. You special summon 2 Fortune 80 monsters from your hand during your next standby phase. Once again, you can play Rewind instead. You also have to have 1 or 2 Fortune 80 monsters in your hand, and it's your next standby phase. So if they pop one during your turn and you play Inherited Fortune, you go through your opponent's entire turn before you even get this effect. It's way too slow. If it wasn't during the next standby phase, if it was straight away, it would be slightly better. And then if it said from deck, you'd probably play one of it just to have it there. And then Bending Destiny. When a monster would be normal summoned or a spell or trap is activated, while all face-up monsters you control are Fortune Ladies, have to have at least one. You negate the summon or the activation, banish that card, and then it returns to the field during the end phase. If you you would never want to stop the spell or trap unless it's a field spell or something like Rivalry, something like Goes and there can only be one. Those would be the only things you'd fully want to stop. But then your opponent just gets it back. So you never really want to stop a trap because it resets it at the end of the turn and then it's live for your turn or for your opponent's turn, depending when you did the Bending Destiny. Stopping the normal summon's great. They get the monster back, but you know they've already used their normal summon. The biggest downfall of these 3 cards is you can't search them with Vision, because they aren't classed as Fortune Lady cards, because they don't have Fortune Lady in their name. Like, you could maybe play one Bending Destiny. You don't want to side it, and you probably don't want to main it, but it's a niche card where it could work. There is also one other, which is the Fortune Lady field spell. It's called Future Vision, which once again, it's not a Fortune Lady card. You can't search it with Fortune Vision. But Future Vision, each time a monster is normal summoned, you target it and then banish it. So it's great if you Visions and normal summon a light, but then you special summon a water, but you don't have another Fortune Lady to draw to. It's just kind of a bad card. You would play it at the end of your turn to stop your opponent's normal summon, but there's just more that you can do rather than playing Fortune Visions. You could play Secret Village, which just stops your opponent from being activating spells if you control a spellcaster, and because every recycles itself, you'll probably have a spellcaster. I'll move that one there, and then going from left to right up to Nadir Servant. Aruru is a level 8, it's a big body, it's a spellcaster that you can banish. When your opponent targets a spellcaster with a card effect or attack, you can special summon her and then bounce one card from your opponent's field to the hand. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't negate. So if your opponent plays an imperm, targets your Fortune Lady past, Aruru can summon itself. You can bounce another spell or trap that your opponent controls or one of their monsters that they control, but the imperm will still negate your Fortune Lady past effect. Imperm pretty much kills this deck because they have the effect of this card's attack and defense become its level times X. So if they imperm every, she just becomes a 0 attack. So Aruru is good to get around a couple things, but it doesn't negate. You have to keep that in mind. You can play Where Art Thou, because the main crux of the deck is to get your level 1s. If you were playing Where Art Thou, you'd play Adhara. Adhara is another extender that you can use with every to go into Crystal Wing, and Where Art Thou is just another way of searching a level 1. You would Adhara, Where Art Thou to add Past or Light, normal summon that so you don't take the 2k. We have Hikari, which would be a one-of. I probably should be playing it, but because I'm playing Desires, I will banish it. Hikari is, when you draw it, you reveal it, special summon it, and then if this card is special summoned from the hand, you target a monster you control, send it to the grave, and special summon a level 1 spellcaster from your deck. Obviously, most of the time, with Hikari, you will be sending Light or herself to special summon water, past, whichever that you need. You could also potentially play the spellbook cards. you could probably play the Spellbooks rather than Allure. Knowledge does activate Fortune Lady Light's effect, because Fortune Lady Light checks where she is and how she got there on the beginning of a new chain. So Knowledge sends her, you draw 2, she doesn't miss timing because she then goes, I've been moved, where was I moved from? I was removed from the field, so it does activate. I know it's there, but I'll move it just a moment. The next, Nadir Servant, I've seen people asking why you don't play this. The biggest reason is because Fortune Lady Every's attack is a question mark, so you cannot send it with Nadir Servant. Even if you controlled not controlled, sorry. Even if you had a card you could search. So if you had something that had, so like, actually I don't think you even can, because it has to have less attack, and it's impossible to have less attack than 0. That's also why you can't send it with the Trap, Dogmatic of Punishment. You can send it with Maximus, but it's just not worth playing with the rest of the cards, because you can't send it with the ones you'd like to. And the final card I'll go over is Gravity Collapse. This is a very, very fun card. If you were going to play it, you would play 3. When your opponent summons a monster, you send a Synchro monster to the graveyard, negate the summon. Your opponent cannot summon a monster until the end of the turn. Obviously, you send your Every so that you get it back. It's one of those niche cards where you can just win the game from it, but you can't search it, and you would probably much rather see something else in your hand rather than the Gravity Collapse. The way that I've sort of worked this out, it does work because D-Shifter and Rivalry can just win you games. I will be working on this deck profile a little bit, because I want to try and make this deck good. Maybe not competitive, because I don't think it ever will be, but I want to try and make this deck consistent, and I want to try and make this deck good. So if you guys have any ideas of how I can do that, please feel free to drop them in the comment section. If I haven't covered something, please feel free to drop that in the comment section soon. But as always guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.